Welcome back to another episode of Motivate with Coach Camp. I, of course, am your host, Coach Camp, and I am down here in the whimsically wonderful studios of SRP with Mr. Derek Michaud. So this week's guest is a friend of mine. I grew up with him down in Walls, Mississippi, went to Horn Lake, and we got to talking one day. And then I come to find out some of the stuff he's been doing since he's gotten older. I realize he and we've got a lot of synergy. It's all this stuff built up. If you guys are ready to get fired up, if you're driving down the road, listening to the episodes, if you're in your house, maybe doing some cleaning or some cooking, I want you to prepare yourself because this is going to have some fire. It's going to have some energy. I have a feeling you're going to absolutely like it. So this week's guest is Mr. David Hatton. You now live in Hernando, I think, right?
Yes.
And you are here with me on the Motivate with Coach Camp show. Sir, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Chris. I appreciate it. Yeah,
man. So look, we got to talking one day and you mentioned to me, if you're looking for a person that does this, this, and this, I've got a story I'd like to come on. I'm like, David, that's a great idea, man. So what you guys may or may not know is so often a lot of my guests, they make a mention to something. And I'm like, I've never highlighted that area. I think I would like to do that. And my guest is going to have a great story, but we're going to start all the way back from the very beginning. So I don't want to give away the spoiler why you're wearing such an amazing blazer.
Thank you.
And I can tell that you've taken the time to properly comb your hair.
Yes, I did.
I like that.
Yes.
So go ahead, share with my listeners here, my viewers, where are you from? Where'd you grow up? Things like that.
Okay. Well, originally I was born in Memphis, Tennessee, moved into DeSoto County in my 5th grade year, started going to Horn Lake Elementary. I have lived in Hernando for a little bit over a year now. I am married to my high school sweetheart, going on 28 years.
I didn't realize. So you all met at Horn Lake?
Yes.
I didn't even know you could find love in Horn Lake.
Yes, and Twin Lakes, by the way.
Wow.
Yes,
absolutely. So y'all even grew up in the same.
Sure did.
Same place. Go a little closer to that microphone because I know you got a lot of energy, but don't you worry about it. My listeners are prepared. They have listened to some loudness coming from me over the years. So you meet in high school. How old were you?
I was about 14 years old.
What?
Yes.
You've known your wife since you were 14?
Yes.
Wow.
Now, we didn't date then.
Yeah.
She seemed a little too young at that time.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, you didn't want to marry at 14.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some places, maybe not here, but nevertheless. So you grow up in Horn Lake and coming out of high school, what were you thinking about you wanted to do?
Well, I wanted to make sure that my wife and I had a sustainable marriage and we wanted to be parents. And so I worked. I worked since I was 14. So I just wanted to continue to work. I had no idea.
What were you doing there?
Well, when I first started working at 14, I was a floor guard at Lollipops.
Are you serious?
Yes. With the mullet and all.
Yes.
Yes.
Lollipops. For those of you listening or viewing, because I know there's folks all around the place, everywhere. Lollipops was a skating rink, but it was attached to like an arcade. And then right around the corner from that, you had the bowling alley and then you had the movies. So back when we were growing up, it was the kind of place where your parents could drop you off in the morning on a Saturday, forget about you.
Yes.
And then come back sometime late Saturday night and just pick you up.
Oh, yeah.
Give you about $15. You could make your rounds, figure out, I don't know, you could eat some popcorn or something. I don't know. Anyways, in the end, it was a really safe, fun place to hang out. And so what all were you doing at Lollipops? You just was a guard?
I was a floor guard.
Did you skate around in circles and stuff?
Did that. I handed out.
Whistle at me a few times.
Probably did. Handed out skates. For people renting them, I would sweep the floors and I would break up fights. And of course, I'd like to get out there on the dance floor and dance a little bit.
Oh, now I was definitely known to light that floor up a few times in my day. I think it's the first place I ever did the worm.
Oh, wow.
You guys are familiar with that. This is a very difficult thing to do at 50, but nevertheless. So how long were you there?
That I don't recall.
Okay.
Probably maybe about a year or so.
Well, the years do blend together. And did you have brothers, sisters?
Yes. I had 2 brothers. Well, 3 actually. One has since passed, but a couple of brothers.
Yeah. And so growing up, being at the Lollipops thing, you weren't thinking this is it. I have found my career move. I am going to be the guard at this place till the day I die.
Right.
That was not what you were thinking.
No, absolutely.
So
not.
What were you thinking about doing? I was going to play for the Yankees at that time, but it didn't work out.
Yeah. I dreamed about multiple things. Sure. Wrestling,
You wrestling like WWE or like
WWE?
Oh,
type
okay,
stuff.
not the circle thing with the headphones on.
Yeah, didn't have the size for that. Yeah. But one of the things I knew I wanted to do again, I want to make sure I provided for my family, that make sure they had stableness.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Did you Did you know any wrestlers at that time?
Actually,
Memphis wrestling was big back in the day.
It was. There was actually one of the wrestlers that lived in Twin Lakes neighborhood. He was one of the ones that take a couple of chair shots every time and get paid $50, $75 every Saturday to do that, but never win in a match. But that's okay. Yeah.
Can you name drop, or is that confidential?
I'm not sure. I will just say his name was Cowboy Chris.
It wasn't me.
Yeah.
By the way, it's a shocker. Some people were like, was it Coach Camp? No, it wasn't me. I was not Cowboy Chris. I saw a thing recently, Lakeview Trailer Park, down in Walls, Mississippi.
Yes.
Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson apparently lived in there for a period of time when he was a teenager.
Yes, with Downtown Bruno.
Did you know those guys then?
I did not. I was a fan.
That would have been really cool. They'd be like, yeah, we used to wrestle backyard stuff, but yeah. I mean, he was a little guy back then. He wasn't the big Dwayne "Rock" Johnson we know today.
That's right.
Nevertheless, a lot of wrestling, a lot of connections here. Okay, so did you go to college?
Actually, I did not go to college initially. I eventually did go and get a secondary education. It probably wasn't until my 40s. Yes.
Oh, okay. So then whenever you are deciding I've got to find something sustainable for me and my family, you weren't exactly sure what you were going to do. So what did you get into?
I got into metal finishing medical devices.
At what age?
That was about 20 years old. 21 years old.
Where was that at?
Actually, Smith and Nephew in Memphis, Tennessee.
Smith and Nephew. Actually, if I think about it, I believe my dad got a job offer there at some point as a machinist.
Yeah.
And they did all kind of stuff. So it wasn't just medical things, was it? It was like multiple.
Yeah, it was all medical devices.
It was all medical devices. For some reason, I thought there was other stuff that they did there. But I guess not. And how did you find out about such a thing?
It was just one of our neighbors that we grew up with said, hey, they're hiring temporaries. You wanted a job?
Yeah.
I bid on it, got the job, got on full time eventually.
All right. And so you move up to there. You're going to Smith and Nephew. What's the wife think about it? You guys are good? She's like, all right.
It's great.
Providing. How old were you when you got married?
Let's see. I was about 21.
21.
Yep.
All right. So that's pretty young. I think I got married at 21 too, though. Mm-hmm. It's hard to remember. Once you get to my age, you don't remember. It's like that's all foggy.
I'm right there.
So you're close to it. Yeah, you're close. All right. So you get married and you're working at Smith and Nephew. How's things going? What are you doing there?
Things are going good. Metal finishing. Had an opportunity to learn different skill sets, machining, inspection, gauge calibration, all different types of jobs, and work as many hours as I wanted to and get all the overtime pay, which.
Oh, really?
Okay. That's, with being a single income family.
Yeah. So your wife didn't work?
She didn't. She stayed home and she homeschooled our children.
How old were y'all when you started having kids?
It was 1 year after we got married. We had our first.
Okay.
Yep.
And so how old were you at that time?
22.
I was asking because I was 23 when I had my first one, and I just remember the wake-up call of, it's been easy to be an adult when I really only have to worry about me.
Right.
And then all of a sudden there's this little person here.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, well, they really need me to make sure I don't screw up.
Right.
So military was what helped me out. I was like, I'm going to military.
Okay.
I didn't feel like I was rounded enough to handle that on my own. So I jumped into there. I guess it worked out. I don't know. It just depends on who you ask. But nevertheless, so how many kids y'all end up with?
Got 4. 3 boys, 1 girl. All adult children now.
My brother has 3 boys and 1 girl. And when they come to my house, I consider getting another vasectomy afterwards. There's a lot of activity going on. That's 4 kids are, that's a lot of activity. That's all I got to say.
Right.
So what's the age span on them?
We had them every 2 years apart. So right now they are 20, 22, 24, and 26.
Was that on purpose?
Yes.
So you guys are just spacing
it
out like that. All right. Yep. Well, kudos to you, brother.
Yeah.
Mine was kind of like, oh, that's happening. All right. Well, there we go. We got that one coming on.
Mm-hmm.
But that's interesting. So 4 kids, was that what y'all were planning for all along? Was going to have 4? You did. So a lot of your life actually kind of has worked according to what you wanted it to be.
So far.
You've realized,
for the most part, yes.
Yeah, you've seen a path, and you're like, all right, I need to do this. You take off, you get that done. All right, we're going to have this done by this time, and check. So that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So then, as you go down the road a little ways, how long were you at Smith and Nephew?
Oh goodness, probably 26 years.
Oh my! Did you have a retirement from there? Did they have a retirement?
Yes, 401k floated when I left there.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, 26 years. Man, that is really impressive. I didn't expect that. I figured like that was just kind of like for a while and then.
Well, I had a grandfather who spoke into my life, and whenever he found out I was getting a job there, he pulled me aside and said, son, better hang on to that job.
Stick there.
And I did.
Yeah. So Smith and Nephew's still around today.
It is.
It's actually still doing its thing up there.
Yes.
So what happens when you retire?
I don't know.
You did retire. What are you talking about? You don't
from
know.
There?
Were you there?
Well, I haven't retired from it.
No, you're still at Smith and Nephew?
No. I left. I went to a different place, a contract manufacturer.
All right,
who
so
actually
I said
provides.
it wrong. When you left Smith and Nephew,
There you go.
then what happens to you?
Well, I step into a different type of role, but for a contract manufacturer who provides parts for places like Smith and Nephew.
So hang on a second.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I get this story correct. So you are working for Smith and Nephew. You
Mhm.
leave Smith and Nephew. You go to work for a place that's supplying Smith and Nephew.
Yes.
Did you do that on purpose?
No.
Oh, is it a competitor?
No.
Oh, it's a supplier.
Supplier.
Well, how about that?
Yeah.
How about that? It almost feels like that was meant to be.
Yeah, I think.
Did you feel
Maybe.
like that you were still in a familiar atmosphere?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
So what happens there? What are you doing over there at that place?
I am currently a supply chain manager.
Okay.
Just stepped into that role just this last fall whenever my GM and my VP tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, would you be interested?" Absolutely. Let's
All
do
right.
it.
So now what we've established is this man has created a life for himself, found the woman of his dreams while still a youngster, planned out 4 kids, stayed at a place for 26 years, went to the place that helped supply them. What was it like growing up? Who was your mentors? You had to have had some kind of a foundation here as a child. You had to have some influences that helped build a person that could see a future, not just see the future, but implement a plan, be able to achieve these things along the way, and then make a progressive step, one thing to the next that all made sense. And you stand here before me today looking much younger than I am, and you're only 2 years younger. And you are much younger looking and acting with a much better blazer.
Okay.
So who was some of those influences that had to play in to these ingredients of what created the person that you are?
Well, great question. I think back to, what I grew up around was a very broken home. Don't want to get too much into those details, but I will say, very broken home, drug abuse, physical abuse, and just very impoverished. But during that time frame and growing up in Twin Lakes, there was a local church that came around with a bus and would pick us up.
What church was it? Can you say that?
I believe it was Calvary Baptist Church in Horn Lake.
Okay. Yeah, I'm familiar.
And they would come around. They had a ministry called Sword. And Brother
that.
Ray Cox and some others, even some of my peers, Poulins and Watts that I grew up with, they were reaching out to us and coming and picking up punks like myself.
Were you cutting up back then?
Oh, well, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you part of the Twin Lake Hood?
Yes.
You know the TLA people out there right now. It's like that's a real name drop. This is Twin Lake Hoods. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. So how old were you at the time when you started going to the church?
That was probably about 15 or 16. They would pick us up in our neighborhood.
You were closer to adulthood than you were childhood.
And they would take us down to a place in Walls and sing, eat, share the gospel. Yeah.
So at 15, 16, who was it that influenced you, or who was it that how did they meet you? How did they get to know you to get you on that direction? Who was that person?
I think it was some of my classmates.
Okay.
Yeah. Jeffrey, John Michael Poulin, Daniel, Bobby Watts, some of those names. And then they were led by Brother Ray Cox. But then eventually that phased out, or I was just got away from it. Then I had a neighbor who actually started doing a similar type of ministry and taking people to what was then Lake Forest Church of Christ. And that lady, whose name is Jenny Denley, her and her husband would, take people in. And I was one of those when there was a falling out between me and my mother, and they brought me into their home. But during that time, she was going around with a van and picking up students my age and taking us to a service. So there's 2 people right off the bat that I recall, just pointing me toward the way.
Yeah. And so were your brothers a part of that too?
My older brother, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Where did you fall in the lineup? Where was the age range? Where were you? Were you like a middle kid?
My mother would argue this, but I'm the middle child. Yeah,
she would argue that.
Yeah,
huh?
she said I don't have middle child syndrome.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, there's definitely a personality trait that a lot of times goes with the lineup that you are.
Right.
So whenever you start going to these church events,
Yep.
Did you understand at that time that this was going to be profound in your life and was going to be life altering, or was it just something you were doing? Some friends invited you, and you're like, "Hey, why not? What else I got going on?"
Why not? One that didn't have too much to do in the neighborhood except get into trouble.
Well, that's true. I lived in that same neighborhood. I know all about it. Yeah.
And didn't really care for what they were saying because I didn't necessarily believe in God. But eventually, absolutely. It made a huge impact in my life.
So your parents, they never took you to school or to church, I'm sorry, nothing like that?
There was occasional. We were the type that would likely go on Christmas or Easter.
Yeah.
And it was various churches.
So I think it's an important point to make right here. So for my listeners, my viewers, one of the things that I really do try to do, and I hope I do it okay, is whenever I have a guest on, I want to know their background, some of the fabric that they were made up of, and how some of that came to being the person that they are today, sitting in front of me, across from me on at the table. And so what it sounds like was, even with the church coming into your life around 15 or 16, it does sound like, though, that even though you say that you were a little bit of a rascal, I like to use the word rascal.
There you go.
I think that that's a fair way of saying got in some trouble, but you weren't a bad guy. Right? Because I think that's how a lot of us are growing up.
Yeah.
You obviously had a good head on your shoulders, because the things that fell in line for you was very intentional, it seems. Right. It was like you had a vision, you had a goal, you were able to go after it. So where do you think those things were instilled in you? Was it at the church? Was it around the peers at church? How did that come about, or was that just part of your DNA makeup?
I think it was looking at my surroundings.
Yeah.
And the things that I grew up around, and what we seen in our neighborhood. And my then girlfriend, now wife, we made a commitment to each other. If we are going to be serious about getting married, and we have a family, that we will not raise them in such conditions.
Was her family the same? Was her upbringing kind of similar?
Hers wasn't necessarily the same as mine. I do know at the very young age of 10, she lost her father. He had passed away unexpectedly. So, there was some, heartache that they went through at that time, and a single mother raising 5 children.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So she came from 5.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of similarities there, though. So you didn't know her before her dad passed then?
Oh, matter of fact, it's interesting you asked that, because she and I talk about the very same year that her father passed away was the very same year that I moved into the neighborhood.
How about that?
Yeah.
It's almost as though that was meant to be itself.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
I believe in that kind of stuff for
I do.
real. So, man, so I didn't know all of your backstory.
Yeah.
I didn't know, and I didn't want to know, because I like to find out stuff on the show a lot of times, and it does help spark that genuine conversation that you have, and it gets me to thinking about some things and about how that plays into the person in front of me. I want you all to hear this part of it. Clearly, you had a lot of things in place early in your life that sounds like you could have used that as an excuse or a reason to be a victim.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's unique to a lot of people in the world. I'm not even going to say America. I'm going to say the world. A lot of people may find themselves in an unfavorable position at an early age. And as they get a little older, they could see that their situation and where they are and where they're starting from was not fair. And they could point to 1,000 different places. This person had it better than me here, and that person had this advantage there. But the story has to be this: personal accountability at some point. When you're a child, you don't have a lot of options.
Right.
You're kind of a product of your environment. Yep. The things that are happening to you are genuinely happening to you.
Yeah.
But as you get a little older, and I don't know what that age is, this could be different for everybody.
Yeah.
But the point is, at some point, you got to take personal responsibility and say, I want a better life for me.
Yeah.
I'm going to do better for me. And if I'm going to have a family, I'm going to make sure they're going to have the family that I would want to have. Yeah. And so you're going to have to make decisions, and you're going to have to be responsible, and you're going to have to step up and step out and not be that mindset that it's not fair. Because life's not going to be fair, David.
No.
It's not. And truth is, more often than not, people are going to go through more turmoil than there are celebration. That's the reality of life. That's why it's so important to learn from mistakes when you make them yourself, grow in the moments after the fact, and all along the way, appreciate every day, because you never know when it's going to be your last. Right. Sir, you had some tools being put in place. They weren't the tools you wanted, probably. Right. If you had an opportunity to sit down and script out my childhood, you probably wouldn't have said, I want abusive parents. I want a tough life. I want my parents to split up, and I want them to be a tough spot for me to have role models in my life. But the truth is, you have a greater appreciation for the person you are now. And you said you have 4 kids. I would be willing to bet they have no idea about what that kind of toughness is all about. But it's because you went through it for them.
Yeah.
Isn't that about God?
Yeah, absolutely.
Didn't Jesus do the same thing?
Absolutely. Spot on. Yeah.
That's how I feel about it.
Yep.
That's how I kind of tie things together sometimes.
Yep.
You know, it's not supposed to be fair, but in the end, I do believe that each and every person is going to go through some stuff that they're going to be able to share with somebody else and make their journey a little better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's what's important, is whenever you're able to share that with other people. Yep. So here you are, you're growing up now. You got Tegra. Is it Tegra? Am I saying that right? Tegra Medical?
Yep.
I want to make sure I mess that up. I'm from Mississippi.
It's okay.
Tegra Medical going on. How long you been there?
A little over 2 years.
You like that pretty good?
Absolutely.
You wouldn't say it on air if you didn't. You'd be like, no, this place is horrible.
Love it.
It's a good spot, right?
Love it.
All right. So that's not all you do, though.
No.
You got your hand in a few other places.
Yeah.
So what else is it that you got going on, David?
Well, before I go there, maybe I need to back up just a little bit.
Beep,
for a little over.
That's the backup button.
Nice. For a little over 10 years. And this proves to me that God has a sense of humor.
All right.
Knowing the person that I was growing up, and not necessarily believing in God, and then him radically saving me in 1998, 5 years down the road, 6 years down the road, he calls me into ministry. So what a lot of people don't know about me, a lot do, but maybe not some of the viewers, is for a little over 11 years, I was a bivocational children's pastor and then student pastor.
Where at?
Well, at Life Point Senatobia as a junior high pastor, and then Central Church in South Haven as a children's pastor, and then eventually the student pastor.
How about that?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yep.
It seems like you did mention that you did some ministry stuff, but I didn't know it was to that. And then the fact that it's with kids.
Right.
Do you think that maybe growing up, those difficult times as a child helped you to understand the importance of having a great mentor and a great role model in front of kids?
Yep.
Someone they could look to?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
It is.
As I just mentioned before you shared that your experiences in life have value once you're able to share those with others. And here you are doing it.
Yes.
So are you still doing that kind of stuff?
I am not. I began spinning one too many plates, and fast forward, I took on something else just as a part-time gig, and it was time to make a decision. It's either something, whether it be full-time work or family, something's going to suffer. Well, my number one ministry is my family.
Yeah.
And so that was not going to suffer. So I ended up stepping away from being a bivocational student pastor, and now I do something else occasionally.
Yeah.
Whether it be locally or traveling. Yeah, I do some MMA announcing.
So let me ask this, because before we go to a break, because I want to really hit strong on that after we get back. You notice how I used the little quip there, hit strong. That's intentional. Yes, nice. So did you always have an affinity to be in front of crowds and show the energy that I know you have?
No, absolutely.
Because in high school, I don't remember that. You're just a few years younger than me, but just for a testament, I was kind of a bit of a wild child. I was all over the place. If you were around the area, you probably knew who I was. You may not always like me, but you knew who I was. Yeah. I'm a pretty loud person out there doing it. And I didn't remember you being front stage all the time.
Nope.
So this kind of came on later in life as well, huh?
Yes, it did.
Well, that's interesting. So before we take off to break, I want people to think about this. So we have this person that grew up from some tough beginnings, created a great life for themselves, a great family man, focused and dedicated to the job, transitions, makes the hard decision sometimes of, do I want to go this path or should I put family first? And it should always be God and then family, in my opinion. Looks like that you've made those decisions. And the next thing you do, folks, I can't make this stuff up. I never saw it coming either. When he shared it with me, it was a jaw drop moment as well. And I'm like, wow, David, we should definitely talk about that on air. Yeah. So don't go away. You do not want to miss the story that's coming up next. We'll be right back after these messages.
A great opportunity awaits. The Motivate with Coach Camp podcast is now in its second season, and we are excited to say that we have listeners all over the United States and in 19 countries. If you have a company and you're interested in some very affordable advertising, while at the same time supporting a great cause, please go to motivatewithcoachcamp.com and fill out that sponsorship page, and we'll get right back to you. You can support the podcast through donations on Venmo at Motivate with Coach Camp. Thank you to all the listeners and guests who have blessed this podcast with their engagement and involvement.
All right, welcome back, everybody. As we were talking about with my friend, Mr. David Hatton, right before we stepped away for a quick second, you, sir, got interested in ring announcing for MMA. Or is it ring? I should say hectagon announcing, because it's really it's not a circle. So it's a hectagon.
Octagon.
Octagon.
There you go.
So I was close. How many hexes in there? Is that 5? Oct is 8.
Something like that.
We got an octagon. All right,
Sure.
so we're doing octagoning. Tell me about that. How did you find yourself involved with, one, MMA, but two, ring announcing?
Yeah. So as long as I've known about UFC from some friends of mine, Roger Stewart, somebody we went to school with,
Yeah.
loved watching the pay-per-views, getting together with friends and watching, guys and ladies just beat the snot out of each other.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
It is. But at the end of the day, a lot of sportsmanship. Well, fast forward to being a bivocational student pastor, and some people that go to the church said, hey, got a question for you. Would you be interested in coming to an event and praying? It's like, okay. Well, go back just a little bit. I had gone to wrestling events and gone to the locker room and shared devotions with some of the wrestlers.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Redeem Wrestling being one of them. And so I thought that's what I was going to do. I was told, come to the Lander Center there in South Haven, Mississippi, and I'll meet you there if you're interested. Okay. I was interested. I thought I was going to be going to the locker room, sharing some devotions. I get taken to my VIP seats. I was walked into the octagon. All right, so here's what you're going to do. They're going to present the colors, national anthem. You're going to pray. It'll be lights, camera, action during all that time. What? Freaked me out, because some people may not believe this about me, but I do not like getting in front of crowds.
How long ago is this?
That's probably about 3 years ago.
So it's pretty recent.
Yes.
So all of this happened just like, so you're going to do some devotional. Oh, by the way, in the center of the stage with all the lights, cameras, and we're going to have a microphone. Yeah. Action.
You're praying. Yes.
And then it's like the first prayer. Help me right now.
Yep. Absolutely.
Wow. So what was that first moment like, man?
Man, I was nervous. Anytime I get in front of crowds, I feel nauseated, like I'm going to vomit right before. But once I get in that moment, once I take that step out in faith, it's on. So that is what happened. And it was exhilarating. One, just hearing the national anthem being belted out right there in the octagon, right next to me, being able to pray and just hear the crowd in unison. Amen. I was like, oh, that was pretty cool. There's not that many amens in church sometimes. So this is pretty cool.
Especially Baptist church.
Yes.
We quiet.
Yep. A little bit.
We quiet sometimes.
Yep. So after that, I go to my seat. Then promoter ends up asking me, hey, would you mind coming back? Mind coming back? And I kept going back to more events. And then I was asked about 3 or 4 events later, would you be interested in announcing? No. We think you'd be good at it. No.
So you said no.
Yes. I said no.
It wasn't let's get ready to rumble. It was let's get ready to, no.
Yeah.
Not going to happen.
Not interested.
Wow.
And they were like, we really think you would be good at it. And I think there's value in that, because a lot of times we box ourselves in or box God in, and others see something in us and they're like, hey, you would be good at this. And I said, you know what? I'll give it a shot. And I did. And as soon as I came out of the cage after announcing the first 2 fighters, the promoter comes up to me. He said, you're hired.
Dang.
I'm laughing.
Did you know you were in an audition at that moment?
Had no idea.
No idea.
That. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. And so SEFC promotion, Danny Schill, had said, hey, man, I think you're great. You're awesome at this. You're hired. I thought he was joking. Oh, no. Ever since, I have been called back for multiple events. As a matter of fact, June 15th at the Lander Center will be the 30th anniversary of their events.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And so what do? You mean, you just go out and you announce the fighters. You still do the devotion. You still do the prayer.
Not the devotion. Actually, that baton has been handed off to others.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So they didn't just keep you there. They were like, all right, we want you to be the announcer.
Yep.
So can you give us look, this is all unscripted, by the way. This is not even written down in my notes. Can you give us an example? Could you announce Coach Camp coming out to the ring?
Oh, absolutely.
Let's see what happens. Let's see what it sounds like.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are live from the top of the SIP. First, introducing in this corner, standing in at 6 feet 1 inches tall, weighing in at 175 pounds, the reigning, defending, undisputed, motivational speaker champion of the world, Coach Chris Camp.
Let's go. Ooh, I don't even know how to fight, but I want to get in that baby. That's really good, David.
Well, thank you, sir.
100% completely unscripted. You had no idea I was going to ask you that, did you?
No idea.
Wow. Yep. That's fun. I ain't going to lie to you. The hype guy has to do their job.
Yes.
You can't be like, all right, next up is David Hatton in the ring.
Yeah.
Nobody's fired up on that.
Absolutely not.
So, the guy, help me out, because I'm not I'm not great on names in particular. Who's the guy that does Let's Get Ready to Rumble? What's his name?
Okay, so Michael Buffer
Did
that for boxing.
Okay, yes.
Bruce Buffer.
Bruce, yes, brother.
Is the UFC.
UFC, right.
Yep.
So what's his catch? Because the other one, so let's get ready to, so what was his?
Michael Buffer is Let's Get Ready to Rumble.
Yeah.
Bruce Buffer is It's Time.
So do you have your thing?
That is one I am working on and implementing directly.
Okay. All right. So you see where I go with this thing. So you got to have that thing.
Yep.
And I was actually told the same thing about signing off as Coach Camp. And it kind of came about, until next time, Coach Camp out. And that stays with the person's memory. They think about that. So whenever it gets close to the finish line, they're ready for that fiery finish off. So I relate so much to everything that you're doing as far as the hypeness, the excitement, the energy. When you go out there and you get into the ring, do you ever have to fabricate it? Is there ever a moment where you're just like, you don't feel that energy?
Oh, no.
I can't imagine.
No.
You're in front of a crowd.
There's preparation that goes into it, getting all the information from the fighters beforehand and who the sponsors are for each one of the events, getting all that information and then hyping up the crowd. Yeah, there's prep that has to go into it, but once I step in there, it's on.
Yeah. And so when you start going down this road, what's the family thinking? What are they thinking? Are they like, Dad doesn't do this? He's not a front stage person.
Yeah. To quote a couple of my kids.
I'd love to.
Cringe.
Oh.
Yes. Yeah. Cringe.
They don't think you're rizzing it up?
Well,
I think that's a word they use. I don't know.
They at first they're like, I can't believe this. But I think behind the scenes, they're supporting me because they do love coming to the events.
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't like necessarily having to pay for going to the events, but hey, that's okay. They all have jobs.
Yeah. Well, they got jobs.
Yeah.
So it's welcome to the real world.
That's right.
Boys and girls. And how old's the youngest?
He is 20.
20. So yeah, they're all grown. Yeah. They all totally. You said that at the very beginning. I couldn't remember the youngest age though. So 20. Yeah, that's. I got a 14-year-old still.
Okay.
She's on hyper cringe when Dad's doing his thing.
Yeah.
Recently we did a thing at the Landers Center, and I was up there and I was interviewing folks and stuff, and I just look over occasionally and I could just see her face. It's just like, oh my God, my dad's being so loud.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but it's just part of it. Deep down, I think though, one day somewhere it's gonna be like. That's kind of cool.
Oh yeah,
that's pretty cool.
That's my day.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So recently, I put out an episode, and I was talking about imposter syndrome, and it seemed like it resonated with you. And I saw you put some comments in there. So clearly, anytime anyone gets into something that is not something they saw themselves doing. Perfectly honest, I never even thought of a podcast. I never thought anything about doing a podcast. I didn't even know about podcast other than the name podcast before I started the first one. And I had never listened to one before doing one. Think about that. Yeah. I had never listened to another person's podcast before even doing my first podcast because I didn't know anything about them really. And I'm not much, I have ADD. So it's really hard to pay attention to stuff. And so whenever I started into this, I didn't know how it was going to look, how it was going to sound, how I was going to do. I didn't know none of that stuff. So I felt like I was faking it all the time. Yeah. But by faking it, really what I mean was I was just being me, and I wasn't going to be anything different than that. Yeah. But I didn't know if that was going to resonate as a good podcast. I had no idea. So there was the imposter feeling of I'm pretending to be a podcaster, but the reality was I was just being me, and that's all I know how to be. And that's all I've ever tried to be. Yep. But it turns out it resonates okay. Yes. Because I've got a lot of people that really support me that I'm very thankful for, and it touches my heart every time. So what was it like for you getting into that ring, realizing I've never done this? I don't necessarily know how to be a ring announcer, but I'm just going to do it the way I do it. Yeah. How did you get past that moment of thinking, I don't think I can do this?
Yeah. I think at any type of role that I've taken on in life, I feel like I'm not worthy of it, that I don't think I could do it. And again, it takes other people speaking into my life and saying, hey, you got this. I see this in you. And I think back to scripture, if you don't mind me sharing.
No, I want you to.
So I've got some life verses that just I cling to, and that's out of the book of Philippians, chapter 3, verses 12 through 14. Paul says, and I'll summarize it. He said, brothers, not that I've already obtained all this or already been made perfect, but I forget what's behind me, and I press on towards the goal in which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. I think about that, and who inked that? Inspired by the Holy Spirit. This is Paul. Go back. That's Saul, the persecutor of Christians. Saying it, he is the one that persecuted to extents that he wouldn't even quantify. But I would go so far to say that was beating, imprisoning, maybe even kill him. I think about that man and how he may have felt on the road to Damascus when Jesus asked him, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? And in that, once he had his conversion, he immediately, Scripture says, started making much of the gospel. He started pointing people to Jesus, and how he must have felt. People all around knew who he was, knew his failures, knew that he was a persecutor of Christians, and here he is being used to spread the gospel. So I think about that, and I'm reminded I may not have already obtained it. I know I'm not perfect. Even Paul says that. I'm not perfect, but I forget what's behind me. I think about the things in my life where I have failed or what I grew up around. I can't necessarily forget. I lived those things. I learned about those things. And one thing I am going to do, I am going to press on. I may not be the best announcer. That's okay. My ultimate goal is to glorify the Lord in and through it. And let me assure you, even through combat sports, he is being glorified and the gospel is being spread, even in some of these promotions that I get to be associated with here in North Mississippi and even over in Arkansas.
Yeah. You said several things here that I want to make sure I go back and hit on. One of the things is seeing something in others that they can't see in themselves. Yeah. Man, is that what a coach does? I think it is. I think it's exactly what a coach does.
You are correct.
You know, you have to have other people in your corner. You need that. You need people to be able to see the possibilities of something you may not be able to see. I just recently had Dr. Toyos on. Okay. He's a world-renowned eye doctor. All over the entire world. Created a procedure that he goes all over the place teaching other eye doctors how to do.
Right.
He never saw himself going that road. Wow. It was someone else that infused that idea in him, and they saw the possibilities of what he could be, and he's taken that and ran with it. And I want to encourage my listeners and viewers to do the same. If you are in tune with someone, and it doesn't matter, they could be a friend, family member, whatever. It could just be somebody you work side by side with, and y'all don't really know each other that well. But you see potential in them. You know, I think a lot of times it's real easy for people to be condescending. I think people tend to a lot of times be super critical. People don't like to be in front of the public eye because of being judged. That's one of the weird things about me is it doesn't bother me to be judged. I don't know why. My mom and dad didn't raise me to be, immune to that kind of stuff. But people being critical, hypercritical of me is just almost in some ways fueled me. Yeah. But that's not everybody. I get that. But whenever somebody did believe in me, which has come along in different variations of life, when they said, hey, look, I see you doing this, maybe it plants a seed. Yeah. And that's what I want to encourage you guys to do. Instead of taking that road of easy criticality, you see someone, think about what the possibilities are for that person and plant seeds, because that might be the next great thing, the next big thing that a person could become that will have an impact on who knows how many lives. Now, the other thing you said was, even in the rough sport of octagon fighting, that God is glorified. I just want to remind you guys, if y'all have not read the Bible, it's a whole lot of gladiator stuff going on in the Bible.
Oh, yeah.
Little B baby David. Y'all know about David and Goliath. Man chopped a head off, became a legend. I'm just saying, well, little slingshot activity, knocks down Goliath. He's a legend. So, yes, there can be glory in violence, it seems. And sometimes, but what you mentioned earlier to that point was the sportsmanship. Yeah. And it is a sport. And you know, you may like it, you may not like it, whatever, it's fine. To each his own on that part. But the truth of the matter is, it is one of those sports that I have personally seen just from watching it on TV, where the relationships and the respect they give one another. I mean, knock a person completely out, the very next thing they're doing is going over checking on them. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's a lot like that in boxing and other types of sports. The sportsmanship is so intense and so fierce, but in the end, it is just the sport, the human, the person, the connection, the respect of being able to even have the nerves to do such a thing is, you know, it's something to be said. Anyways, I will say this, finding yourself where you are now, knowing what all you've been through, knowing where you're at currently, what do you think the next step is for David in the octagon? Do you think there's a bigger role coming, or you hope it is?
I wouldn't mind that. Okay. I don't know that it's going to be. I never thought that I would be doing this. I thought, okay, now I am doing this. Yeah. SCFC, this is great. Love the family. In that, a father of a couple of fighters who had fighters fight in a local event here in North Mississippi told a promoter, out of California, out of Arkansas, hey, you need to ask this guy to come. And that has grown now where I am going over into Northwest Arkansas, Central Arkansas, and even been asked to go to Colorado to announce events. So if it turns into something full-time, great.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm having fun with it.
Yeah. So I think the point there is the fact that you're just letting it happen naturally, organically.
Yep.
It's kind of like with Coach Camp stuff, to be honest with you. I had a vision of what I would like to have done. Didn't know this was going to be part of the path, but in the end, it's not like I'm trying to force anything.
Yep.
It's what is natural and what makes sense. And as long as you can be you and you're not trying to be someone else,
Yeah.
and that's what people enjoy and love, you never have to worry about losing it.
Right.
I think that's key too. You said that you went into the ring not knowing if you could announce, but you just realized, hey, I'm going to face this vulnerability.
Yep.
I'm going to do the best I can, and I'll just be me.
Yep.
Well, I think that's actually speaks to this platform. Yeah. I'm not trying to impress anybody. I'm just trying to be me. And so when you do that, people feel that. They feel the authenticity. And I would encourage you to continue the path. Yeah. I'd also encourage you to continue the path of really cool blazers.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a few now.
So I've seen a couple of them. They're pretty spicy.
The very first one I borrowed from my oldest son.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yes.
So he had a
He had it
razzle dazzle.
He had one for a prom.
That is pretty good.
Kept it.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So does any of your kids, they think maybe, hey, look, maybe I'd like to either get into fighting or announcing?
My youngest son actually said something to the promoter, Danny Shell here in DeSoto County, and said, hey, I wouldn't mind whenever he retires from, this, that I do it.
Dang, they pushing you right on out.
That's okay.
Well, I'm sure there's plenty of opportunities in a lot of directions. So real quick, a couple things about MMA, some things I didn't know. So how many branches are there? What are I know you have, you have UFC, but then there's other venues, or however you want to say it, other promotions. Yeah, I was using different words. So yes.
Yeah.
What are some of the other ones? Because I don't know all of them.
Some of the big names that I'm familiar with is UFC, and then there's Bellator.
That's the one I was trying to think
Bare
of.
Knuckle Fighting Championship. There's several of them. And then again, you zoom back into.
Is Pride part of it or no?
Actually, I think it was at one time. I'm not sure if it's still around.
Okay.
But then there's the local ones, SEFC or NWFA. I mean, there's tons of them out there. They're all around the world. Yeah.
And so which ones are you mostly involved with?
SEFC and Bellator, or excuse me, NWFA. But I will say both of those promotions have had fighters that have come through, fought numerous times, and made it to those bigger promotions.
So what's the biggest, UFC?
Yes.
Is that like Major League Baseball?
That is, absolutely.
Okay.
I would say UFC and Bellator are, some of the top two.
All right. And so basically the bottom line is this. It doesn't matter where you start. It's all about what you do. And then you never know where that might lead to. And for you didn't know that just going into the ring, doing a devotional and a prayer was going to lead you to doing a handful of events, leading to a handful more. Yep. And at some point when you're in UFC and you're doing the thing, you got to come back down here to Hernando.
Hey, I'm all for it.
Because don't forget the small people like us down here in the Hernando area.
I would still live in the area.
Yeah, I would too. To be quite honest with you, I would too.
Yep.
So anything you want to leave my listeners with as we get close to the finish line? Some final thoughts, some insightful David Hatton ideas.
My encouragement is do not box God in. A lot of people, whether they're Christ followers or not, they will box God in and think he can't use me this way. There's no way he could use me to be an announcer or be in combat sports. Really, there's no way he could be glorified. No, I disagree. Always be prepared to step out of your comfort zone and be used by God, even if it's announcing, even if it's through a podcast, whatever it may be. It could be janitorial. It doesn't matter. Give it your absolute best. Forget what's behind you. Don't worry about what anyone else thinks about you. Press on.
Yeah. I think that's so relevant, so well said, is the fact that you can give God the glory in anything you do. And says, I don't want to mess up the verse, but to all things you do, give God the glory.
In Colossians.
And the truth is, and thank you for that, because I couldn't remember Colossians. I'm glad to say Corinthians. My memory's bad, y'all. It is what it is. But I do have those flashes of memories. But you're absolutely right. And it doesn't matter what the area is, whether it is fighting, whether it is working at Tegra Medical or podcasting. When the message is genuine, it's real, and it stands to serve a higher purpose, at the end of the day, it's going to have the impact it's supposed to have. And I think that that's why we do all the things we do in life, is hopefully to impact other people in a positive way, to spread that love that ability to be able to impact other people's lives in a great way. Look, I got news for you. I am so glad that you mentioned to me about coming on. Never would have thought in a million years that having MMA as a highlight on the podcast could be such positivity, but it absolutely is. You've spawned some ideas for me for some future guests that we're going to have come in here. And just knowing you personally from whenever we were growing up to now, dude, I had no idea that you were so squared away, and I was not.
No.
You were. You definitely followed a path, but now you're actually getting to see that that whole thing come to fruition. And I think your kids are super proud.
Oh yeah, I'm super proud of our children. Yeah,
I have
amazing.
no doubt.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. David. I wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you.
And at some point, maybe I can have you on my show when I'm coming out on stage to do a speech, and you could just introduce me, because that, my friends, will get me hyped up enough. We might blow the room up.
It'll be much louder than what I just did. I promise you that.
I love loud too.
Promise you that.
My wife will tell you that. She's like, "Oh, I don't encourage him."
Nice.
So to my listeners, my viewers, thank you so much. Always, man, your encouragement and your support. There's really not words to be able to describe how much that really truly does mean to me. I'm going to ask you to continue to do that. If you think about being a sponsor, I would love to have you on Team Coach Camp. Look, go to my social media sites, go to my website, motivatewithcoachcamp.com. Continue to tune in. And as always, until next time, Coach Camp out.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no, I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up, it's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no friend to me. It's not working out, maybe it's the chemistry. It's time to break up so I can make a better me. Better believe in your mind, cause it's everything. You can mold, shape, find almost anything. All it takes is